Hello and welcome to PFF at Night. I'm Doug Kyed, joined as always by Ari Meirov and Brad Spielberger. The Carolina Panthers have a new starting quarterback. We'll start off with that first. But first, Ari, how are you doing today?
Doing really well. We are here another week closer to football. I mean, it's right around the corner. We have roster cuts next week. A lot of news today, a lot to discuss. So a lot going on.
Brad, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great, but talking about football, college football comes back this weekend. My Vanderbilt Commodores playing at Hawaii. I couldn't swing a trip out for the game, but Lord knows I tried.
My UW Huskies still haven't named a starting quarterback, so we'll see how everything goes there for the college season. But Baker Mayfield, the new starting quarterback of the Carolina Panthers. This did not come as really much of a surprise. Baker Mayfield, throughout the first 4 years of their careers, of his career versus Sam Darnold's career, has been a much better quarterback, 84 PFF grade versus a 60 PFF grade. Baker Mayfield has been more successful on the field, but Panthers were still paying Sam Darnold quite a bit more. They gave up much more draft capital to acquire him a year ago than they did to get Baker Mayfield. But I was out there in New England for the Panthers-Patriots joint practices, and yeah, Baker Mayfield's the better quarterback. So this is definitely the correct decision from Carolina. Ari, what was your reaction to this news?
Yeah, not shocking at all. I think when the trade initially happened, we all spoke about how, they were saying it's a competition. But when you look at the actions of the Panthers the entire offseason, the way they tried to trade for Deshaun Watson and went after all these draft quarterbacks, there was discussion about Kenny Pickett at number 6 to trade up for Corral. It made sense. They were telling us Sam Darnold is not the guy for us, and they trade for Baker Mayfield, and it would have had to be a major upset for him not to be the starting quarterback. So it's official today. They didn't even start or play Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold in that second preseason game. Looks like they already knew about this decision last week, and now it's official. And as we've known since the trade happened, the first game is going to be against his former team. Times. Baker with a chip on his shoulder is the best version of Baker Mayfield, and I could just not wait for that game. It's going to be phenomenal. It's a shame it's not in Cleveland, but whatever the case is, it's going to be great to see him going up against Kevin Stefanski and the rest of the Browns.
All right, as you mentioned, PJ Walker and Matt Corral played in that preseason game against the Patriots. PJ Walker really struggled in that game. Matt Corral suffered a Lisfranc injury. Matt Rule said he's likely out for the season. So that settled some things up there as well. Not that either one of those guys was competing for the starting job. But Brad, Baker Mayfield week 1 against the Browns, Baker Mayfield with a chip on his shoulder. What are the expectations this season for him?
Yeah, the Browns will be paying Baker Mayfield more than Carolina will, so that's always fun for week 1. But, I think you go back to the stats a little bit, and the interesting thing, and I think the thing that sticks out is you go back to 2018 when they were drafted, they are number 1 and number 2 in the NFL in total turnovers. But on the other end of the spectrum, Baker Mayfield is top 5 in big-time throw rate charted by our graders, and Sam Darnold is not a top 32 quarterback in big-time throw rate. So he takes a lot of risks, yes. A lot of those risks don't really pay off, but he does have the upside of sometimes completing these big passes. You have guys like Robbie Anderson, who is a deep threat down the sideline. Obviously, DJ Moore, one of the new highest paid wide receivers. They have talent there. They just haven't had a quarterback that's willing to take some of those gambles. He's going to take them, and we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, it's an interesting offense. They have improved their offensive line a little bit, getting Ikem Ekwonu at left tackle. They added some other pieces of their offensive line this season. But yeah, like you said, DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson at those top 2 wide receiver spots. You've got Christian McCaffrey in the backfield. I was asking some Panthers writers how much they've seen Christian McCaffrey, lining up in the slot, doing some creative things. They said not a whole lot. It's going to be, Christian McCaffrey is probably going to be an every down back there. So that third wide receiver spot, as much as that Panthers offense has improved this offseason, still some question marks there, whether it's going to be Terrace Marshall, who's missed a ton of this summer with lower leg and hamstring injuries, Shi Smith, the 2021 6th round pick. You've got Rashad Higgins in the mix as well. So they could still make a move there at wide receiver if they really wanted to. But Ari, what are just your overall expectations for this Panthers team and this offense this season?
Yeah, no, it's a pivotal year for everybody, from the quarterback in Baker Mayfield, where it's the final year of his rookie contract, to Matt Rule and really the entire coaching staff, where we know there is a lot of pressure on them from ownership and David Tepper. Really, there was talk about potentially having him go last year, but his contract was just so large that it was basically impossible to do. They kept him around for this year. They hired a new offensive coordinator in Ben McAdoo, and it's going to be really a make or break year for all of them there. And it's going to be interesting because we've spoken about this as well. Last offseason, we really saw some moves that they made in free agency, and it were just head scratchers. It really made no sense. I think you can make an argument. The moves that they made this offseason, on paper at the very least, it looks pretty good, right? You mentioned Ike Ekwonu. Austin Corbett comes in. I know Bradley Bozeman is injured right now, but he's going to be at center most likely. Even defensively, where they add Xavier Woods and some other guys as well. There were just good moves that they made. Now, will it translate to the field? We'll see. I think a big part of this is Christian McCaffrey. Remember, last year, they started 3-0 when he was on the field with Sam Darnold. As soon as he went down, the offense was just not the same. Probably part of the reason why they're being so cautious with him throughout OTAs and camp is they just don't want this to happen again. So they're going to limit everything until it's real and the games count. So as long as he's healthy and they have some weapons on that offense, I think this team has the potential to be maybe in that wild card positioning situation. But, again, it's a massive year for everyone on that team, and Baker Mayfield as well, because he's looking for that second contract. He wanted it in Cleveland last year. They couldn't come to terms. Now he's going to try to get it in Carolina. We'll see what happens.
Almost everyone in that Panthers defense is like first round picks, second round picks, lots of young players in there as well. So they were already a top 5 defense last season based on EPA per play. They could vault into that elite category if everyone plays up to that potential. But Brad, what are just your expectations for the Panthers this season?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, they obviously went out and traded some capital as well, bringing in CJ Henderson, the former top 10 pick of the Jacksonville Jaguars. It sounds like he has had a great camp. JC Horn getting healthy, playing in the preseason after missing pretty much the entire season last year. They could be really good on defense. You mentioned they've had a lot of draft capital invested up front as well with Derek Brown and Brian Burns and all these guys. So if all that comes together, I think that is going to be their philosophy. I think they're going to want to run the football, play defense, kind of all the mantras we hear. But at the end of the day, you are going to have to probably throw the football to win some games. And like I said, Baker Mayfield has struggled recently, but he can occasionally make those big throws to win you football games. And that's just something that Sam Darnold could not do for them. So I don't expect him to carry them. They shouldn't want him to carry them, but I think he can game manage to a degree. And they could be a decent, 7-8 win football team if things break their way.
I'm not sure if I'm all in on the Panthers this season, but I do have pretty high expectations for them. I thought their defense looked really good against the Patriots in those joint practices. Offense, I think that even the Panthers would admit it's still a little bit of a work in progress. I actually heard that from a Panthers source that the offense is a little bit of a work in progress. They're still seeing to see how things shake out there. But one other note on defense, they hired Steve Wilks as their secondary coach this offseason. I think that was a big hire. And they, like I said before, they've got a ton of potential there in their secondary. That segues into the Deshaun Watson news that everyone was waiting for. It's been quite a while now since that news actually dropped. It was on Thursday that the NFL and Deshaun Watson's people, the NFLPA, reached a settlement. It's an 11-game suspension. I think that the biggest surprise for me, we were just talking about how Baker Mayfield's first game is against the Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson's first game with the Browns will be against his former team, the Houston Texans. I think that there were some reports out there that said that the NFL wanted to avoid that game, wanted to avoid him playing against the Texans. And now that will clearly be the biggest story of that week. Deshaun Watson coming back from the suspension, playing against his former team. We're seeing a lot of that this year of quarterbacks going against their former team in their first game in a new uniform. Russell Wilson against the Seattle Seahawks. If Drew Lock wins that job, he would be going up against the Denver Broncos. We mentioned before Mayfield and the Browns, and now Deshaun Watson and the Texans. But Ari, I know we talked about this ad nauseum, but what was just your final reaction to the Deshaun Watson news?
Yeah, it just sounds like everyone involved in this just did not want it to drag into the season, and they're able to find just some sort of common ground. And 11 games is where they were able to settle. It sounded like the Watson side was going to go a max of 10. The NFL wanted 12. They find in the middle at 11. It's going to be before that Texans game, which I did find to be a bit odd, but that's where it ended up falling. And again, it's just not going to drag into the season. I don't think anybody is happy about this. And the NFL, as we all know, wanted a full season. The Watson camp believed he should not have gotten anything, if at all. And they ended up settling here at 11, and everyone is going to have to move on. And this is going to be what it is. There's also a $5 million fine. He's also going to have to go and get some counseling, which I think is very interesting, because as soon as he spoke to the media when the news came out, he went back to his regular talking points of, I'm innocent and I didn't do any of this. So how will counseling actually work out if he's still with those talking points? I'm curious to see what happens there. But whatever the case is, this is where they ended up on, and the NFL will have a chance to reinstate him, assuming everything goes well, and he will be back for that Week 13 game against the Texans, and most likely he will be playing in that game. And that is where the NFL ended up finalizing here with everything. And this does not go to court. Everyone just moves on with the season, with, I guess, everyone talking about some other stuff and not this hovering around the league.
Yeah, it was pretty much a disaster from a PR standpoint, with Deshaun Watson, the team, Browns, releasing a statement from him with him apologizing. And then it was like 5 minutes later that he was talking to the media and saying, like you said, Ari, that he had done nothing wrong. Dee Haslam also spoke to the media. She seemed to be implying that maybe the counseling that Deshaun Watson would go through would reach him to understanding maybe some wrongdoing that he did do. So, well, I mean, I'm sure we'll never really find out there what the conclusion of that counseling and everything is. But Brad, like Ari said, everyone's going to move on with this situation. But how does this look from an NFL standpoint, where they were pushing, or supposedly pushing, for a full game suspension, and then when it comes down to it, they're willing to settle for 11 games?
Yeah, honestly, I think the fine too was a bit small. I think the way you could probably compromise and try to sell not getting the full season was getting at least $10 million. I know it's kind of an arbitrary number, but I think it just means a little bit more. He made $10 million last year for the Houston Texans. He also, when he reduced his salary for this year, took it from about $11.5 million, I believe, down to the $1.035 million. So that number, I think, kind of meant something. And so I think the fine and the games combined is not great. But also at the same point, they were able to avoid even the appeal actually happening by settling. They were able to avoid, of course, any court cases. So I imagine they're okay with it. And the last thing, as you mentioned, again, just from a purely football standpoint, this is arguably worse for the Cleveland Browns, because Deshaun Watson's contract will not toll to this year, will count on his deal. He will move on to the second year of his contract next year, and he's still missing almost the entire season. And look, he could come back. They can maybe squeak in the playoffs. If you look at their first 11 games, they could go by 500 with Jacoby Brissett. It is not a tough schedule, but I mean, the AFC North division they're in with Cincinnati and Baltimore and Pittsburgh, if they can figure out quarterback, and then just the AFC, at large in the wild card hunt has so many good teams. So, maybe they thought that as well and said, in some ways, not going to the full 17 is kind of working against the club as well. And they took some solace in that.
In more quarterback news, there's kind of two different Tom Brady stories running concurrently right now, where Tom Brady returned to practice after his 1 or 2 week absence from the team in the middle of training camp. But then also there was news that broke this weekend that Tom Brady was very close to joining the Las Vegas Raiders alongside Rob Gronkowski until John Gruden nixed the deal. Let's start off with the first one of Tom Brady being back, or at least I'll start off with the first one with Tom Brady being back. Right around the end of last week, you kind of started to hear some rumblings that this was kind of a Giselle-related absence. Seems like that's probably what wound up happening here. I think that Aaron Wilson of Pro Football Network reported that Tom Brady was in the Bahamas at an all-inclusive resort during his stay away from the team. And that kind of jives with what I heard, that this was kind of a family matter, that Tom Brady was spending time with his family and his wife while away from the Buccaneers. Pretty much unheard of for an NFL player. I don't think that anyone else in the NFL would get away with this, with his team, with his teammates. but Tom Brady is the GOAT. So if anyone can do it, it would be him. Very bizarre situation, but Ari, what was your reaction to Brady returning, but also the report of him nearly joining the Raiders?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Buccaneers should just be thankful that Tom Brady is back in the first place, and I guess just let him do whatever he wants. I mean, like we heard about the Miami Dolphin stuff. He did retire sort of at one point, and they thought he might not be back. So the fact he's back in the building, whatever, take a 2-week break, as long as you're back for this season, I think we'll be fine. And now everyone could finally calm down and not talk about the Masked Singer as well, which was just insane. Anyways, besides for that, the Raiders stuff is far more interesting to me because as somebody who has followed a little bit of combat sports recently, you should know that whenever Dana White speaks, don't take everything seriously. But then whenever you have Rob Gronkowski confirming the story as true, it kind of tells me, you know what, there was something going on over here. And it seems like there were talks about this possibly happening. I do remember that Tom Brady was at a game with Mark Davis before his free agency. If you guys recall that, there was a picture floating around. And it sounds like they definitely had some discussions about this possibly happening. And as I said, Gronk confirmed it as true. Dana White then doubled down when he had his post-fight press conference over the weekend and said, yes, it was happening. It was done. John Gruden came in and basically blew the deal up. So no, we're keeping Derek Carr. There is a quote from John Gruden in early March of 2020, basically explaining why they are sticking with Derek Carr and they won't pursue Tom Brady. And eventually it did come down to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Los Angeles Chargers. Those are the two teams that eventually made offers. And I know everyone's talking about Tom Brady's quote that he gave the shop. I don't know if that was Derek Carr. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but it definitely makes you think it could have been him when you hear all this story and you have one of the main characters in all of it confirming it as true. It makes me believe that this was definitely going down until John Gruden, who at the time still had 7-8 years left on his contract. So he thought that he was safe and he could go up Derek Carr for now. Clearly not. And eventually he's out. Tom is in Tampa, and some way, somehow, he's still playing at age 45 right now.
Yeah, that quote from the shop, Tom Brady said that there was a team, they were in the mix, they dropped out at the last minute, and he said, you're going to go with that, MFer? Although, I mean, he actually said the word. I'm not sure if we're allowed to do that or not. But it also, as part of that, right afterwards, I forgot who it was that was also talking to him on the show, but he essentially implied that he wouldn't have gone to that team anyway. So maybe Dana White is being a little bit optimistic that he would have wound up joining the Raiders and gone with them instead of going to the Buccaneers. Very curious to see how it would have worked between Tom Brady and John Gruden. Those are two, pretty big names, pretty big personalities, and things didn't seem to work out. I mean, obviously Tom Brady wound up winning a Super Bowl with Bruce Arians, but not sure how that relationship was in Tampa. So curious to see how things would have gone with John Gruden in Las Vegas. But Brad, what do you think about this Raiders news, Tom Brady being back, everything going on around Tom Brady right now?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're a Buccaneers fan, you can thank John Gruden for 2 Super Bowls now, playing a significant part in you getting another one more recently. But yeah, I mean, I think this also underscores maybe we're going to see more and more kind of leaks like this of, a team got punished for tampering in Miami, and obviously theirs seemed very egregious. The NFL said, and we've never seen it on this scale and to this degree and this magnitude, which probably leads you to believe they see a lot of it, but it's probably more subtle and not quite as open and ridiculous as it was in this Miami situation in the middle of the season. But I mean, look, Tom Brady's retirement tour, everyone knew clearly it was still going to be a worthwhile thing to invest in. I think that has proven to be 100% true. Maybe Gruden could have given him some tips for his upcoming broadcast career as well, coaching him in 2 different areas. But, end of the day, I think it is, it's also just interesting that he went on this trip, not on the Masked Singer, as already mentioned. They probably love that free publicity, or refuse to deny the potential truth of that. But I'm not going to say I think it's going to impact their win-loss record or anything like that. But we do know how much he has preached his investment in being, totally 110% invested in everything football. Maybe this helps him recharge and do that. But I don't know. It's getting a little interesting, I think, in Tampa at this point.
Absolutely. More quarterback news starting off this show. Lamar Jackson, a few people have already put it out there. I think Jake Glazer was the most recent who said that the Baltimore Ravens are offering Lamar Jackson more money than Kyler Murray. This isn't a big surprise. I had heard something similar that Lamar Jackson is fully expected to get north of $46 million on the whatever new deal that he eventually winds up signing with the Baltimore Ravens. So, Ari, were you surprised by that? And what do you think we eventually wind up seeing from this Lamar Jackson deal?
Yeah, Jake Glazer, who reported this last night, mentioned that the Ravens have offered more than what Kyler Murray is making, but he added a very significant part as well, that the reason why they are not close right now is because of the Deshaun Watson contract, which of course we all know is fully guaranteed. We've mentioned this a few times. We've wondered if that could be the reason why this is going on, and it seems like it is. Again, Deshaun Watson, 5 years, $230 million, fully guaranteed for a guy who had a lot of off-the-field problems. Here I am in Lamar Jackson, a former unanimous MVP, has done so much for this offense, for this team, for the city. Why can't I get some sort of a contract like that? It's understandable, but at the same time, Deshaun Watson had 4 teams going after him, and over here, this is one team, and he still has a few more years of team control. And I'll just mention one more thing. I don't know if you guys ever checked this out, but Eric DaCosta was on Thomas Dimitrov's GM Journey podcast, and he basically mentioned how in any negotiation we do, we will not lose any negotiation. We will never let that happen to us. And it just makes me wonder that giving a fully guaranteed contract to a quarterback right now in this situation is essentially losing the negotiation. So I don't think the Ravens are going to go there. We know Stephen Bisciotti, the owner, was one of the only owners, or the only owner, who came out and said that the Deshaun Watson contract is wrong. I don't think the Ravens are going to go there this year, for sure not. So I think it is an uphill battle to get this deal done. If he was to accept a Kyler Murray type of a deal, I'm sure the deal will get done. But it sounds like the fully guaranteed contract from Deshaun Watson is what's holding this up right now.
Yeah, and that Watson deal obviously is quite a bit of an anomaly, as you mentioned. The factors surrounding it, the fact that Deshaun Watson was essentially getting to pick the team that he was going to be traded to, and that there was that many teams interested, offering deals, offering trades. That's really what allowed that to happen, is to him to get that fully guaranteed deal. At the time, people were wondering if this was going to be the regular thing for quarterbacks, and we've since learned that no, it hasn't. Maybe that changes with Lamar Jackson, or maybe that changes with Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert. But up to this point, quarterbacks are still not signing these fully guaranteed deals that Deshaun Watson got. So, Brad, how do you think this all winds up, ending up for Lamar
It's
Jackson?
interesting. We're talking about this now. I actually put an article out about 2 weeks ago on PFF.com, just titled "How the Kyler Murray Contract Sets Up Lamar Jackson." And one thing I dove deep into is that Baltimore has had this trend recently of they get their players to take a little bit less in total money, but to give much stronger guarantees. So if you compare the deals their players are getting to the other guys at the top of the market, I'm talking about Mark Andrews, Ronnie Stanley, Marlon Humphrey, like all these guys, they're a little bit less in the actual value, but their guarantees are stronger than almost everyone else. And so on that notion, I thought, okay, maybe Lamar Jackson would be willing to, let's say, take 43, 44 million per year, but he would get a darn near fully guaranteed contract. And I think the issue is he not only wants to surpass Kyler Murray and Deshaun Watson, maybe Aaron Rodgers at 50 million as well, maybe in between there, but then still also get that fully guaranteed deal. And I think the interesting thing is I wouldn't be too discouraged if I'm a Ravens fan about this getting done. The dirty little secret is this kind of this rolling guarantee structure we've now seen with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Kyler Murray. It's kind of a facade. It's kind of just avoiding fully guaranteeing money, both for the escrow reasons and also, frankly, I think for optics and just to help teams not give fully guaranteed contracts to players. So when you're getting money that becomes fully guaranteed 2 and 3 years out into the future, it basically is fully guaranteed. But nevertheless, I get why this is a battle. And the last takeaway is, good luck to the Bengals and Chargers next offseason. I wish you well.
Yeah, another player representing himself in contract negotiations, Roquan Smith. He announced that he's going to play this season. He's going to play in his contract. He's going to bet on himself. This seemed like it was the only possible conclusion to this hold-in that Roquan Smith was doing, because felt like the Bears and Roquan Smith were pretty far off in these contract negotiations. I think Roquan Smith wanted to be paid, as one of the higher paid defensive players in the NFL. And I just don't know if the Bears value that linebacker position at that level right now with new GM Ryan Poles. Certainly it hurts that they're not, Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus are not the crew that drafted Roquan Smith as well. And I think it was on Thursday night, it was during the Bears preseason game. The ESPN crew was passing along some comments from Ryan Poles that basically implied that this is what was going to happen and that no deal was going to be struck just based on the value of that position. They weren't willing to go up that high in a contract. Brad, I know you're close to the situation as a Bears supporter. So is this pretty much what you expected to happen here?
Yeah, I can tell you the two sides did get a little bit closer. There was some headway, but just not nearly enough. And I don't think a deal was going to get done. I will say it was kind of interesting. I think that this came out now. I could have thought maybe you wait up until right before week one, see if more, it was agreements can be made, but it probably shows just how big the gap was that he just went ahead and said, all right, forget it. I'm not going to get a deal. I'll just go ahead and get ready for the season, which is still almost 3 full weeks away. So not super surprised by it. I think this team and this new regime with Ryan Poles and everyone in that football administration department wants to really establish a new precedent. They want to come in and say, we are not the same, the past regime. We are going to be difficult to negotiate with, maybe to a fault, but in a general sense, just not really be taken for a ride. And I don't think they view an off-ball linebacker being worth $20, $22, $23 million per year as frankly, no NFL team probably should view it that way. And so this, I think, is a win, if you want to call it, for Chicago, getting him to stay, get rid of his trade request and just focus on football. And look, if he has a phenomenal season, maybe you still go back to the table and get something done.
And I think I mentioned it on a previous show. The fact that teams weren't offering first-round picks for Roquan Smith kind of showed that maybe his value wasn't there where he wanted it to be. And there was no use in the Bears trading him at that point for, 10 cents on the dollar, 50 cents on the dollar, whatever it would have been. But I think that this does show, I think based on some of the comments that Roquan Smith made after saying that he was going to bet on himself and play, that it can be awkward when a player is negotiating for himself without an agent. And the Ravens certainly have to hope that it doesn't get to this point with Lamar Jackson. But I think that was an element in play here, is that Roquan Smith doesn't have an agent and that he was dealing with the Bears themselves. Ari, do you think that played a role in this?
No, it definitely could have. And I think the way it was all handled was, in my eyes, a bit poorly from all sides, really. But I'm just looking around at this. He's mentioned that I'm going to bet on myself. If he does ball out this year, it's not like he just becomes a free agent next year. The franchise tag is always going to be there for Chicago. And it just makes me wonder, because Brad could probably elaborate more on this, but it reminds me a little bit of how the Allen Robinson situation all unfolded in Chicago, the way he wanted an extension. They couldn't get a deal done. He had a good year, 2 years ago, and he thought he'll become a free agent. They put the franchise tag on him. He was stuck in Chicago for another year, and it was just a super awkward situation. So could this be that type of situation? Potentially. How will Roquan Smith act right now with the team? Will he be all in? Will he become the leader that he always was? Or he'll be like, I just want to get out of here, play this year, and get to the free agent market. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds. Again, it's a new coaching staff, a new regime. He called them out in that 4-page statement. I'm just curious to see how he does play and how he reacts to all this once he's on the practice field, once he's on the playing field, and we'll see how he does this year. And if it gets to that point next year where the franchise tag isn't in play, I think it becomes really awkward for everybody.
Let's get into some trade news from the day. We already had 2 trades. Las Vegas Raiders trading Nick Mullins to the Minnesota Vikings. That means that Jarrett Stidham wound up winning out in that backup quarterback battle behind Derek Carr. We also saw the Buffalo Bills trading Cody Ford to the Arizona Cardinals for a 2023 5th-round pick. And one final note, in Albert Breer's Monday Morning Quarterback column, he threw out there that Patriots might be shopping offensive tackle Isaiah Wynn. That one was definitely interesting to me because Isaiah Wynn has had kind of an eventful offseason where he's ready to play on the 5th-year option of his rookie contract. He's going to be paid around $10.5 million. Clearly in that position, a player usually wants to get a contract extension. We've been talking about it with a lot of these guys who are, entering the 5th year of their rookie contracts. Instead, the Patriots moved him to right tackle, from left tackle to right tackle, which immediately kind of lowers his value a little bit. He's been injured, hasn't been out on the practice field recently. I think he was back in a red non-contact jersey. But I think kind of playing to his advantage right now is that the Patriots don't have a lot of depth on their offensive line. You kind of know who's going to start right now. If Isaiah Wynn sticks around, it would be Trent Brown at left tackle, Cole Strange at left guard, David Andrews at center. You've got Michael Onwenu at right guard, and then Isaiah Wynn at right tackle. If you take Isaiah Wynn out of the mix, you're talking about James Ferentz possibly starting, maybe Arlington Hambright, Justin Herron, Yadni Kajust, someone who's just really inexperienced at that position. So it would be a little bit surprising if the Patriots did trade Isaiah Wynn at this point, but this is the same team that traded Logan Mankins right before the 2014 season and went on to win a Super Bowl. So anything can happen with the Patriots. They're willing to deplete their depth if it means opening up salary cap space or getting draft picks. But Brad, were you surprised at all by the Isaiah Wynn news?
Yeah, I think it is interesting. You did mention the, leverage they've kind of gained by rebringing in Trent Brown and then now kicking him back over to left tackle. Interesting enough, just like the Jets, also in the AFC East, bringing in Dwayne Brown and moving George Fant over to right tackle in the middle of a contract negotiation. But yeah, it is interesting. I mean, he has had his injuries, but he's a good player, maybe not a great player when he is healthy. I guess the last piece you mentioned, maybe shopping, kind of looking around. I think the Cody Ford trade was interesting. He was the 39th overall pick. There is a 39th overall pick in Chicago in Tevin Jenkins, who is allegedly being shopped as well. I think a 5th round pick for Buffalo there was great work. I mean, frankly, Ford has never had a season grading 55 or above, just has not been a great player, is now pretty much a locked in as a guard. Yes, Tevin Jenkins is starting at right guard at the moment, but nevertheless, I think it sets a floor because Jenkins has 2 additional years on his rookie deal. And yeah, maybe a Bears, they could provide some value for the Patriots with depth at the very least, or if they do want to move on from an Isaiah Wynn.
Yeah, Isaiah Wynn, like you said, he's been solid, but he has had a number of injuries throughout his career. I think they could probably get, I don't know, it's tough to gauge what the Patriots could wind up getting for Isaiah Wynn. They'd probably want maybe a player back as well, so it's not just strictly dealing a former first-round pick for a late-round pick, but not sure if anything winds up happening there, but certainly something to monitor. Ari, what was your biggest takeaway from all the trade news today?
Yeah, first of all, the Cody Ford trade was very interesting because it's the second trade this offseason Arizona has done now where they are reuniting one of Kyler Murray's former teammates in college with him. It was Marquise Brown first, Cody Ford now second. All those guys are very close friends from college and now they're together. I don't know if that's planned out there by Steve Keim, who now has Kyler Murray locked in to this big contract. I would keep an eye on just Kenyon Drake, who it was reported today that he's being released by the Raiders. The way it was worded was that the plan is for him to be released, which usually means this is a message to the league to try to trade for him probably before tomorrow when the transaction wire comes. So we'll see if anybody decides to try to trade for him. If not, he will be released and he'll be available for the rest of the league. And then just all these wide receivers we've mentioned a million times, but Darius Slayton, Denzel Mims, Preston Williams, Lynn Bowden, and a bunch of other guys. I think there is some decent receivers out there who are on the bottom of depth charts. I want to see if there are any more of those conditional 7th round pick trades coming up. We will have more definitely by the end of next week, but I'm keeping an eye on the wide receivers for sure.
Yeah, keep an eye on a couple other running backs as well. Myles Gaskin of the Miami Dolphins. He's been their leading rusher over the last couple of years. It seems like he's kind of fallen behind in that pack of running backs of the Miami Dolphins. Also, Darrell Williams for the Arizona Cardinals. He's another potential trade cut candidate just based on some things I'm hearing from around the NFL. That will do it for this Monday's PFF at Night. Keep it on pff.com for all of your news and analysis. And subscribe to PFF Plus for $80 annually. You can get a free trial for a week as well. Try out PFF, check out all the grades, check out all the stats, the fantasy tools, betting tools, everything else that is free for a week. And if you do decide to sign up for $80 a year, it's only $1.54 per week. It's the best deal in sports. It's better than the Tom Brady contract. Better than a lot of other deals. So, like I said, keep it on PFF.com. Sign up for PFF Plus. Only $80. That's down from $200. So quite a deal right there. Anyway, follow Ari on Twitter at MySportsUpdate. Follow Brad on Twitter at PFF_Brad. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kyed. And we will be back with you guys again on Wednesday night. See you then.